Welcome to episode 151 of The Route presented by White Whale Marketing. The Route is a glorified coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. Before we begin, just a couple things to cover. As always, if you haven't already, take the time to subscribe, follow, like the podcast on whatever platforms you tune in on. As you can see here, if you're on the YouTube channel, you can see at the top hand right hand corner, all the different icons we're at as well. So that's Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, and I believe 6 other audio platforms. So if you take the time to subscribe, follow, like, it allows the podcast to grow a bit easier. And then you could also maybe rate 5 stars or say you enjoy the podcast on some of those platforms as well. So if you do that, it's much appreciated. And with that as well, if you're watching on video, as I was just mentioning about the platforms with Apple, Google, Spotify, just above that, you can see it says at Throughout Sports. So that's our platform on all social media. Most importantly, when I mentioned the social media accounts, unlike maybe other podcasts, we're on LinkedIn. So considering we're chatting with a lot of people within the sports business world as well. If you'd like to start your network, grow your network, or even just maintain it, maybe following us at The Route Sports on social media would be great to connect with maybe myself, the guests, like-minded people that are maybe interacting with the post or with the page. And that way, maybe it's just an easier launching point. So check us out there at The Route Sports, and be on LinkedIn as well. We're on all the traditional platforms where you can catch each week. We release the episode and say a little bit about it, so you can catch us there. And then there should be clips as well. So if you've done that, I appreciate it. But now with that all said, we can get into today's guest. So I'd now like to welcome someone who has developed their career from starting in hockey to golf to then becoming the Director of Athletics and Recreation at Mount Allison University, and who is now the CEO of U Sports, Pierre Arsenault. Welcome to The Route. How's it going?
Hey, Chris. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as the podcast name states, The Route. So if you don't mind, you might be maybe taking us maybe where you went to school and how you ended up in the position you're in today.
Yeah, I guess I grew up in Riverview, New Brunswick, and like a lot of people, sports were a big part of my life growing up, and really fell in love with just from a very young age with the idea of competing and the idea of everything that comes along with the sport and challenging yourself and also just enjoying consuming it. And so as I got to the university level, getting ready to go to university, the one passion I had to try and pursue was the idea of sport. And so I did it was a Bachelor of Physical Education degree at the time. It's kinesiology now at the University of New Brunswick. And within that program, you had the ability to do different streams. And so I really was interested in the sport administration side so I was able to finish my bachelor degree and then had an opportunity to do a master's of sport administration, Master of Arts in Sport Administration at the University of Ottawa. So I went and continued and did that program. And that was, I guess, the start of, in that program, we had to do an internship and through that internship got me started working. It was Hockey Canada in Ottawa at the time. And that was the mid to late 90s. That's what got me started in working from sport from there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I guess building on that as well, was there ever maybe a decision prior to going to UNB, right, whether it's for kinesiology, as you said, it's now named, or was it always maybe kind of, I'm going to probably do something within sports. That's just my passion, and we'll kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, it was. I think at the time, everyone gets to that stage where you try and make that decision of what road you'd like to go down. What's interesting, I think, today is even back then in the early 90s, once you made that decision, it kind of became a bit of a career path for the most part. Whereas now you see the younger generations comfortably changing careers and moving about. But I would say that really it came down to, if I wasn't going to get involved in sport, it would have been doing a business degree that would have maybe migrated its way back into the business side of sport anyway. I really had good support from my family and parents to be able to say, do something what you're interested in and pursue a passion. And then it did become a little bit like you described, where I remember getting out and into the master's program and had an opportunity to do an internship component as a requirement of our program. And when you looked at it, I say, well, what would I enjoy the most? And had an opportunity to go work in hockey. Grew up playing hockey all the way through, and I remember at the time being 22 years old and being around, showing up and working and being around the game every day. It just for me. Really underlined that the idea of going and making choices around things that you were interested in, had passion for, really made sense, because I was enjoying it so much, showing up and going to work every day and consuming the conversation being hockey and development of sport.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. One thing that you mentioned there was kind of interesting, just in regards to maybe more so the listeners as well. When you're talking about that younger generation, how it's more maybe easier to be fluid throughout the different industries. Do you find maybe that's an advantage the younger generation has, or maybe a disadvantage as well, because maybe they don't get to maybe know or understand or develop their connections further as well, as they're just kind of maybe moving fluidly throughout the different industries?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and there's probably, you would want to look at it from the opportunity side of it, and I do think the ability to, the world, it's well documented that the world is way more connected, and there is way more flow and ability to cross into different areas of information, and so that's part of what makes that ability makes that a doable thing. And so I would say the opportunity in that is that people building careers at this point, you can take what you've learned from one experience, and you have pathways now that maybe didn't exist before to move that in a hybrid direction or a completely different direction. And I think it has happened enough with people that it also there are lots of evidence that it's doable, and therefore you can have some confidence in making a bigger decision like that, to show that, to see that there's examples of people all around that have done that. And the challenging side, I would say, sometimes is it maybe just adds more confusion into the busyness, and the opportunity sometimes can add stress of confusion into people's lives and career choices. And so, but for sure, the opportunity to be able to understand different things you might want to try and pursue, and pathways of how to get there, because of things like this, are certainly more available today.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because I think you're absolutely right. With all the different opportunities now, it almost does become a little more confusing, because you're like, oh, do I go over here? Do I go over here? Do I develop within this lane? So that does make a ton of sense. And I guess maybe one thing that's advantageous as well is sports is becoming maybe more of a business too as well, right? Where it's almost more of a, let's say, media type of business, right? Because all the different streaming and broadcast deals. So that maybe makes a ton of sense too, if you can kind of gain experience in one field and then transfer that over as well. And I guess going back to your route, right? You're mentioning how you were doing that master's degree, you got that internship with Hockey Canada, and you really loved maybe, coming to the office and speaking about that sport every day. Building on that, where did you go following the internship, and how did that maybe begin? Was it through a connection? Was it through maybe a professor at the University of Ottawa? How did your career continue to develop from there?
Yeah, so I was doing the internship with Hockey Canada. They had an Ottawa office in the National Sports Center at the time, in Ottawa, and towards the end of that internship, the job posting as technical director of Saskatchewan Hockey Association became available. So I went through. I was able to leverage it. If you go all the way through, when I was a student at UNB. I did some volunteer work with Hockey New Brunswick just to try and get some experience. They were called New Brunswick Amateur Hockey at the time. That volunteer experience helped give me an ability to earn the internship with Hockey Canada. And then because I was working in Hockey Canada, that gave me some reference point to be able to apply and successfully get hired as the technical director of Saskatchewan hockey. So you didn't know, and that would be the story of the next steps as well. You don't know that a previous step is going to lead to the next step, but the every experience in taking what you can and doing, showing up and doing an honest job in every experience will create maybe something down the road, and you don't know when it will happen. So that certainly happened with me. So I was 22, moved to Saskatchewan and spent 3 years working with Saskatchewan hockey. And again, I feel very, very fortunate and blessed for the people that supported me at that time. It was a great system out there. I got to really travel around a lot, to work with a lot of local community people in hockey and in the communities out there. And then, I probably, you also, as you build your career, you also ask that question as to where do you want to settle and what's important to you. And so as I was looking to, how do I maybe make a play where I can continue to evolve experiences but be a little bit closer to family and to the region I grew up in, and that means a lot to me. And so I had the opportunity to come back and work with a regional office of Hockey Canada at the Atlantic Centre of Excellence in St. John. Worked there for 2 years, and then an opportunity came along to be the executive director of the New Brunswick Golf Association. And it was, for me, that step was the first opportunity to be responsible for an organization myself. And it was the right size of organization to get in and understand the leadership roles, working directly with the board and having more accountability to decisions that were being made. And so spent 7 years there, really enjoyed it, really learned a lot. It was an organization that was, it was small enough that you're still rolling up your sleeves and really involved in the operational delivery and right there on site at provincial championships, things like that. And then in 2009, the longtime athletic director at Mount Allison University retired, and that job became available, and I went through the process. And I think what really drew me to that position was the idea of working with student athletes and working with university sport programs every day. Really, I looked at that and said, I think that's something I would really enjoy. And the challenge of building programs with athletes and teams and building infrastructure and impact in communities. And so I said yes to that opportunity and spent 13 years there. And as I was working away and built all the different experiences at Mount Allison, just over, I guess, about a year and a half or 2 years ago, was contacted about the possibility of the CEO position in youth sports, and ultimately thought that was a nice next step, a nice next challenge and opportunity. And so here I am.
Yeah, and I love where let's say the story went, or in regards to what you kind of answered there, because that's exactly where my head was at as well in regards to what I wanted to ask you. The first thing that kind of comes to mind, especially maybe going back a bit, and then we'll kind of work our way back to where you are now. You're mentioning how, right, you're doing the internship, you started off in New Brunswick, then you're in Ottawa, then you went to Saskatchewan, then ultimately you ended back on the East Coast. But one of the things that I find of interest when you're talking about, sports business specifically in Canada, a lot of the opportunities aren't always in, let's say, people's hometowns, right? So do you find maybe, let's say, someone who's listening who is maybe in a master's program or is, starting their career, but maybe they're looking to potentially settle down soon. Do you find it was advantageous earlier on to kind of maybe move around, be a little more fluid in regards to where you could live? And then once you had that experience, you could then apply it to, hey, I want to go back to New Brunswick, and then I can maybe position it correctly for a potential organization. Because I'm sure, as you know, in Canada, a lot of those different opportunities are in Toronto or Vancouver, and that's where maybe it kind of makes it difficult for maybe young sports business professionals in Canada.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I would encourage that. I mean, you have to. The individual has to be comfortable with the idea of that as well. But if the individual is comfortable with the idea, I certainly, when I look back, I grew up in New Brunswick, was away for a bit, and then ultimately I've lived my life and raised a family back in New Brunswick. If someone asked me, would you do it again? I would say absolutely, for sure. I would take those years and go away. And the perspective you get from being in different parts of the country or different parts of the world, the perspective you get from the drivers of those communities is just so valuable. And like you said, I think it's always a balancing act between what will be what wins out, the opportunity, and are you really comfortable with the idea of living wherever the opportunity is, or is region going to play a role? And how do you then maximize your opportunity given a region you want to be in? I think professional sports is a great example of that. If you want to be a GM of a professional sports team, then largely you're going to be subject to where that opportunity might be, and that, which is completely good and fine if that's the driver that makes the most amount of sense, and that you'll land where you land on that. And but I think if you have the opportunity to pursue experiences when you're young, particularly the other connected piece to that is oftentimes life is a simpler version. You're making decisions about yourself, maybe another partner. When children come along, we have 3 kids, and when decisions about family started to come into it, then maybe the way that you assess things comes, maybe it doesn't, but it may that may have an impact as well. And then I think the other part coming out of the pandemic, none of us would have chosen the pandemic. One of the pieces coming out the other side is that there has been a redefinition of where people can work and how, and now 2 or 3 years post, it's the assessment again of what is going to be the optimal state for organizations in terms of office culture and working remotely. And so that is not going away, and we'll continue to try and make sense of it, but it does probably change a little bit the conversation about where opportunities will be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said it perfectly there. It's almost more so the perspective of where you're at. And I guess then building on it as well, right? You were talking about how, you decided to go back to New Brunswick, and then from there, the opportunity came for Mountain Allison University. What did that role look like, right? When you're the director of athletics and recreation, what kind of things are, coming to your desk, and what kind of things are you doing to maybe advance the university along?
Yeah, I really enjoyed, and I'm very grateful for having this opportunity. I spent 13 years there. One of the things in a university context that was new for me a little bit from having been in provincial and national sport organizations is that athletics in a university context, has the connection of all the other arms of the university. And so HR is not maybe one person or not the executive director in your staff. It's a complete department, and finance is a department, and external university advancement and facilities and all those pieces have their role as well. And so you're running your unit and overseeing and trying to be strategic about building something that you can get excited about for athletics, but you're also trying to do it in a context that fits into ambitions and priorities and directions of the university. And so I was able to really, it was a long, I was there 13 years, and the ability to keep learning from people, and the ability to keep trying to get command of situations, and how to recognize opportunities and leverage those opportunities, and how to really build off of that. It was big. The ceiling of that was high, and there was a lot of opportunity to continue to keep learning. So I really enjoyed that. And then, in my role, really was overseeing a varsity athletic program, but then also overseeing campus recreation and on campus and our facilities as well. And so we went through a strategic planning process where we built a strategic plan, renewed that strategic plan, really tried to bring focus to how we could build competitiveness and connection to our institution and with our varsity programs. And we wanted to try and it was an institution that really had a level of excellence connected to it. And we wanted to make sure that everything we were doing at athletics, that we would build in a way that reflected that. And during the years there, we had some really fun things. We were able to really build back competitiveness to a football program that had some challenge. We won back-to-back championships. We were ranked nationally, playing and hosting a national semifinal. Hosted a women's basketball nationals on the college side for the first time ever. Had those teams, women's and men's. And the men's team won their first championship ever, a couple of appearances at nationals. And so the ability to build out competitiveness and have a plan for how to go about that. And it's never enough. You're working with a lot of programs at the same time, and you have some success with one, and maybe other teams aren't moving as quickly as everybody wants. And but that's what we're working through, and also trying to understand how you can leverage a story and leverage having some focus and some structure to your thinking and plans for development, and how that can be the reason why people will get on board and support. We were able to do a pretty transformational turf field project. There had never been a turf field on campus. And so to organize and show some thinking and some strategy around program building, got some people excited and wanting to help around the field. And we did over the course of 2 years, did a $2.5 million field project and renovation, which has been such a step forward for the entire community and certainly the university here.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I don't know if this question might be too broad, but how do you build back up a competitive program? Is it through, maybe I'll leave that to you. Obviously, we don't need to get as into it as what your plan was, but I find that something so interesting, right? Where you're able to kind of build up these teams again and make them competitive and have these top 10 finishes, as you were mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is having, this will sound like a bit of an obvious thing to say, but having lived it, in the cases where we had success, if I watched a women's hockey program play in the national in our conference final twice in 3 years, the football team winning, the basketball teams winning. In every single instance, there was really good and competent and dedicated leadership from your coaching staff. And the role that I would have played was just trying to work with them to, what they needed was enough support and enough resource to be able to execute on their plans and to be able to move plans forward. And so my role was to just give them a fighting chance and to be able to support. We were school-wise, school population, we were one of the smallest in all of youth sports, and so from a resource point of view, it just wasn't in community size. You're not in a big city, you're not, and so it's just not the same conversations. You can't beat the Yankees if you don't have the same amount of money that the Yankees have by trying to do it the same way the Yankees do it. And so it was really just being creative and trying to find ways to support and give good people a chance to then go do what they do best, and then get out of their way and let them put the plans in action by supporting with some resources that they needed.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and almost a little analogy to Moneyball, right? Just kind of doing things a little differently, which makes a ton of sense. But no, that's amazing. And I guess, as you were saying earlier on, from that opportunity, then got offered or asked to interview for the CEO at U Sports. What does that role look like now, right? Obviously, it's something where it's hopefully maybe evolving. I know there's bigger tournaments now. What does the role currently look like for you, and what kind of things kind of maybe make up your day to day?
Yeah, I mean, so when that opportunity came along and I was recruited into conversations about maybe taking on the CEO role with U Sports. And as I went through that process, I certainly had a pretty good context of, having lived it from a certain vantage point for 13 years as an athletic director. You're at national meetings every year, sitting on different committees, I took on, as years went by, I took on different leadership roles within the AUS as part of their structure. And so I certainly had perspectives. I knew a lot of the people involved that I would be working with or dealing with, and coming across. So yeah, when the opportunity came, I felt fortunate enough to have a pretty decent understanding of what might lie ahead, and now starting in the role. When you're at a university campus, you're certainly working within the system, but you're fundamentally trying to support and build and your set of programs and your set of teams. Whereas from a U Sport perspective, you're more dealing with the collective, more dealing with how do we continue to elevate our story of this system entirely, and at the very core of the system, the student athletes, and what they do every single day. And that was, for me, that was one of the reasons that really drew me to the opportunity, is that the content of our organization, the content and the story that we get to tell every day, which is our student athletes at the core, is a very good one, and a very authentic one, and a sincere one. That the more that we can get people engaged on, how this story reinvents itself every weekend as our teams go out and play across a number of different sports, the more we can share what is a really good thing. And so, over the course of my career, I develop, or I just, you find things out about yourself. And I guess for me, one of the things that I have recognized that I guess is an area of comfort, or an area that maybe competence is the ability to take a conversation, to take an issue, and to hear a lot of different vantage points or perspectives on it, and to try and help that group and be part of moving it to a consensus, or moving it to a position of movement and direction, as opposed to just always talking about it. And that very much is the role of if you look at a conference level or nationally, in U Sports, we're often in those positions where you're looking at the opportunity to bring different vantage points, different perspectives, and try and move it forward into a place that people have been heard, and people have feel that they can see their input in whatever movement is, but that it ultimately we can move it to a place that is better for everybody.
Yeah, and I think on that point in regards to maybe advancement or even just movement within U Sports, I know I was speaking to someone at some different Canadian universities recently, how maybe they've been approached sometimes by American businesses where they're saying, hey, we want to help grow your programs, right, your athletics department. But they're saying they always get approached with, let's say, the American university sport mentality, where they're saying it just doesn't fit, right? It's two different, philosophies, right? Or two different products, let's say, as a whole. How do you find that in comparison, right? Where a lot of times, I don't know, people maybe compare NCAA to U Sports, how it's just the two different countries that are differences, but obviously there's much more. So how do you find maybe there's ways to kind of grow without maybe comparing yourselves to, let's say, NCAA? Because sometimes maybe that's the approach people often think you need to go about it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, and that's a natural comparison, and one that we're certainly familiar with, and like you said, I mean, I think if you start with the very basics, you're talking about a country of 350 million people, and then a country of 35 to 40 million. Yeah. So just even the footprint is tenfold different. And then you've got, I mean, that's why Friday Night Lights and shows like that are shows. It's interesting culturally in the States how much it embeds right to the to the lowest levels, and that really drives a strong sport market, and in the ways that are good is that it brings resource, and sometimes it's not always in good ways. And so I think in the Canadian system, you're right. It's continuing to find our own way to it. It's taking what pieces do make sense and could work in our system. There is the opportunity to the Canadian university student athlete is in some ways a simpler experience, and I mean that in a really positive way, because it really can be the combination of a great education with a really high-end student experience. And if you look at a number of our markets across the country, there is no question that the sport that's being played there at the university campus is the highest level of sport in that community. And so, we and then it trickles down. I mean, we are not as youth sports, we're not the ones that are driving that Tuesday night game on a campus in BC, and neither is necessarily Canada West, but Canada West is supporting that, building their conference championships, and we build the national championships. And so, we really want to focus on all the ways that, our vehicle to really be able to grab people's attention with the student athlete story is our national championships. And so really we want to build as much ability around that as possible, to build lead ups, to connect. So if we're doing things during the season as a lead up, that we really can leverage the telling of the story and get people engaged, that it's building to something, and you should pay attention to those Wednesday night games and those weekend games and those weeks leading up to really exciting conference playoffs, which are going to lead to really high quality nationals. And so, we're continuing to work away at that. And I think that is one of the real opportunities is that the level in so many places, the level is really unequivocally the best sporting level that you have in that region.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think almost just what you're saying too. It's like an organic type of growth where it's not going to be, let's say, some random gasoline that just comes out of nowhere and lights a program on fire, similar to, let's say, Colorado at the moment with Deion Sanders. It's more something where it's, the students or the athletes that are involved, or the different people that are within that community that are actually going to build up that excitement around it, right? Where it's not just going to be hype that just dies and fades and comes and goes. No, but I think that's a great point, and that's kind of the unique comparison between the two. I guess before we wrap things up, I have two questions I'd like to ask every guest before we end things. So obviously we've kind of gone through your route from, let's say, you as a student to where you are now, and I've been doing this for, let's say, 151 episodes now, and since day one I've always said I'm going to live until I'm 103. And with that, I'm going to listen to this podcast and sit in a rocking chair and think about all the different things I've been able to do in my career so far. So I want to put you in that same scenario. 103-year-old Pierre, you're on a rocking chair, you're on this yellow chair behind me, and you're thinking about all the things you've done in your career to date. What's maybe one story that stands out to you, whether it's maybe at U Sports Championship, something you did at Hockey Canada, or even your time in golf, or even Mount Allison? Is there one story that's going to stick out when you're 103 and you're like, wow, I can't believe I got to do that within my career?
Yeah, well, there are many for sure, and I feel, and what I would say is, my wife Karen and I are raising 3 children, Jack, Jamie, and Ben, and one of the best, you don't fully understand it until you look back, but one of the best gifts that we've had is that our children have got to grow up around really impressive and really hardworking and honest and good student athletes while I've done my job every day. And the impact it's had on their lives has been a really important one. And we have the oldest is university age now and playing as a youth sport athlete, playing football at Mount Allison. And so it's been really cool to see. We felt really fortunate for the impact of that they've had an inside look and to follow me around on game days and things like that. And then the other thing, I mean, just to tell a quick, story that in 2013, our football team, Mount Allison, hadn't it had been 16, 17 years since we had won a league championship, and there was a stretch in there. I arrived in 2009. There was a stretch in right before that time where there was even, talk. And I remember of canceling the program and questions as to whether or not it could ever be competitive again. I remember as recently as like the start of the 2012 season, we had people writing about us saying we should just cancel the team. So when we went on a win streak at the end of 2013, won in 2013, and then went undefeated, won again in 2014, it really was, and to see in 2013 the ability once we won to host the UTEC Bowl on our own campus and really go right down to the end. We hadn't done the turf field project yet, and to stand on conviction to say, there was some talk that the conference didn't want the game to be played on a grass field at Mount Allison, which we understood. We had agreed that whoever won was going to host the game, but we understood some concerns. But to have some conviction around the fact that our student athletes had approached things the right way. They had gone about, done the work. They had succeeded. Our coaches had put a good plan in place. And so we didn't really back down on that we had earned the right, and that we knew that we could do a good job. And in the end, we're grateful that everyone involved agreed with that and gave the opportunity to play the game on our campus. And it was one of those days that will be remembered in this community. And it was a crazy big crowd, and we built a fake stadium on an old grass field, and had just a really special day in the community.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it seems like you almost have that full circle moment, right? Building up that program, going from is it going to get canceled to winning, and then also now having your son being a student athlete there. That's very cool. I guess the second question I now have for you, you went to 100-year-old Pierre. Let's go back to maybe you're walking on the University of New Brunswick for the first time on campus. You're 16, 17, 18 years old, looking forward to the future. If you're able to go back in time and have a conversation with the younger self, what would maybe be one piece of advice that you've now learned? You'd be like, hey, young Pierre, this is something I think you should know that I've learned over the years that I think would be, advantageous for you to know.
Yeah, I would say that and I would tell that to my young self, because I can look back and know that my young self probably was dismissive of this, but there is something to learn from everyone that you come across in the system. And I remember when I was younger, and you kind of think you had some things figured out, and you would arrive to a national meeting or a regional meeting or a committee meeting, and you would be pretty quick to dismiss someone else's perspective, and you say, well, they just don't really know, or even though I hadn't even really taken the time to find out their experiences or their lived life path themselves. And so, I would say that so much of my career and so much of the habits that I've built over time have come ultimately from understanding other people's perspectives, and from paying attention to how successful people around you, how they operate, how they interact with others, what they take from those discussions. And so it's been a huge piece, and one that I would encourage to have awareness for people that are starting out. And connected to that, I would say the other piece is, I really believe in the value of understanding your organization and understanding your area of subject matter. And, and that sounds like everyone to some level will satisfy that. But in an organization, sometimes if something is someone else's responsibility, then you just completely wipe your hands of that and say, well, I don't need to know anything about that. I just need to know that this person is going to handle it. Particularly in positions of leadership, if you can really take the time to understand the drivers and understand the nuances of these conversations, not to micromanage them, but to be prepared and to be educated and to be able to be a valuable contributor, because you do understand your product as well as you should.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a perfect way to kind of end the podcast, where it's just kind of, putting a bow on it all, right? Just kind of bringing it all together and just leaving it with something for listeners to think about. So yeah, Pierre, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great having you as a guest. And unless there's anything else you'd like to share, I really appreciate you coming on and being our 151st guest.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris, and keep up the good work. It's great to share these stories.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And that's it for episode 151. See everyone next episode.